Okay, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. I hope you can all see and hear us clearly. Welcome to today's Q&A session for the student record. Fabulous, thank you. If you need any technical support during the session, please email training@hisa.ac.uk and one of my colleagues will help you. If you'd like to engage with the trainers today, please use the chat box if you've got any technical issues or email, and then the Q&A section on the top bar is where you'll need to put your questions for today, please. So today's session will be recorded and will be made available shortly after, along with the written Q&A. Today we have Laura, who is our head of program management, and Rachel, who is our head of collections development, who I'm going to pass you over to now.
Thanks very much, Katie. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm sounding a little bit on the croaky side. So I'm getting over some tonsillitis. So if I go super Barry White, you know that's why. But Rachel has got my notes. She can my voice give out completely and she can take over. But hopefully we won't need to go. We won't need to do that. But do bear with me and my slight croaking. So thanks very much for joining us at the session today. You'll note it's a slightly different session than was originally billed. It was originally going to be another FAQ session, one of the series we're running on the 28-29 data specification, but based on the feedback we had from that session and from other sources as well, I thought it would be more helpful to run this as an introductory session into what the in-year data collection program is, why we're doing it, how we're doing it, kind of give you kind of that key overview first. So that's what this session is. That's hopefully what you were all expecting and hopefully be a useful session for you all. So I'll take us through the first part of the session today. So as Katie said, I'm the head of program management at JISC, and my role on this program is that I am managing the in-year data collection program. So I'll just take you through over the next few slides an overview of the program, and then I'll do a brief tour of our new web pages so that you can see firsthand where the kind of core information is. And then I'll hand over to Rachel to go into a bit more detail about some of the core concepts. And then hopefully we'll have some time for questions at the end, but any that we don't have time to address in the session, we'll make sure that we pick up afterwards and publish to our website. This is going to be recorded as well, and we'll publish this on our web pages too, so that those who can't make it can look back at it, and you can also come back and have a look. So with no further ado, I will get on to the content itself. So the in-year data program is a program to manage the transition to more timely in-year student data, to allow us to respond to student needs whilst the student is still with us. As you'll all be aware, there's currently quite a big lag between data being available and the time period to which that data relates. And so we've been asked to implement in-year data collection by our statutory customers. And what we're hoping to achieve by the programme is to enable decision-making that is informed by data that is relevant and timely. At the moment, decisions have to be made on what can sometimes be quite out-of-date data. And so that's something we're aiming to solve, and that should have benefit beyond the sector as well. So, for example, it should resolve current issues that we have with gaps in international migration and population estimates, for example. And the kind of key date to draw out for you there from those bullets on the slides are that the first mandatory in-year student data collection is going to be in 28-29. So that is what we are working towards. And just to flag as well, we will be sharing the slide deck with you afterwards as well, so that you'll have this information to refer to afterwards. So I thought useful to start with what we've been doing so far since statutory customers asked us to start work on implementing in-year data collection. So really what's been going on is the kind of planning and the foundational parts of the programme, and we're now ready to launch the programme in earnest. Throughout last year, we've done quite a lot of early evidence gathering and consultation work with data providers, with software suppliers, and also with our statutory customers to kind of sense check the direction that we're taking it in. And it's also helped with key decisions, such as the decision to go with a cumulative data model. More on that from Rachel later. And one of the main things we've been working on is what the data model will be like, particularly thinking about can we minimise the data so that it meets the requirements of our statutory customers, but isn't asking for anything extra, because we're mindful of keeping the collection as efficient as possible and not adding burden where we don't need to. So that's been one of the activities we've been working on so far. We're also in conversations with statutory customers about whether in future in-year collections mean that other additional collections won't be needed anymore. So the aim really being that all the data that's needed for funders and regulators can be gathered through the HESA student data collection. That's ultimately the long-term picture of where we are heading for. So this is the high-level plan that we have been developing, sharing that with you now. We are in that first design stage at the moment. And so we're working with statutory customers, providers and software suppliers to make sure that we're developing the right approach and the kind of best approach to implementing in-year student data collection. That's included a lot of work on the data model for 28-29 and also developing what our approach to quality is going to be and how we're going to transition from where we are with an annual collection to where we want to be with an annual collection and also an in-year collection. On that piece in particular, we're working on what that transition picture looks like, and we're going to be sharing more information shortly. But our current thinking is that we're going to have a multifaceted approach with some elements that are going to be tested in the 26-27 and 27-28 student collection. Some of that will be like internal JISC process checks. Some things will be involving statutory customers, and some aspects of in-year we hope to test on an opt-in basis with a subset of providers so that we can make sure it works for everyone. And the other key thing to flag that is essential to this phase of the programme is the collaboration that we need with you, because if we're going to make this programme a success, it needs to be jointly with providers as well. And so really want your input in shaping the way that we implement in-year. And I'm going to touch in a minute on the ways that we can do that and hear from your feedback and build that into our plans. And future phase, before I move on to the next slide, I'll just briefly explain what the other phases are. But that second phase, the transition and infrastructure development, hopefully is quite self-explanatory, but that's the period where we make the changes that we need to our own processes and systems to enable an in-year collection. And then that kind of yellowy lime green is the kind of go live. That is the first full in-year collection in 28-29. And the final phase of the programme, as it currently stands, we're describing as kind of an embedding year. Or embedding phase. That will be covering the collection year 29-30, where we'll be doing another go at an in-year collection alongside the annual one to make sure that the changes that we've implemented are kind of settling down into more standard practice. So that's the very high level plan that we're working to at the moment. And as I mentioned, more detail about the transition period, that phase 2, we'll be sharing with you soon. So I've flagged that really for this to work, we want to work with you together to make sure that we implement something that's workable. And there's a number of ways that you can do that. So one of the key ways will be to engage with the consultations that we're going to be running over the next few months, mostly focusing on different aspects of the data model. There's going to be consultations on topics such as reference period dates, historic amendments, and session status. And it's really critical that we get to hear your perspective on those proposals so we can implement something that works for for all parties. So do look out for those, and I'll show you where that information is going to be on our web pages shortly. There's also sessions such as this one and the FAQ sessions we've been running. So do keep an eye out on the HESA calendar and join us where you can for those sessions. And I think the other methods of staying in touch you'll already be familiar with, such as contacting our liaison teams directly and signing up to the HESA newsletter. So I'm now going to stop sharing so I can share my screen and give you a little tour of the web pages. So just bear with me a moment while I share. Okay, I'm just checking, can everybody see that okay? Yep, brilliant. So I'm taking you in from our data collection landing page. And then as we go through the web page updates, kind of how information is shared on our web pages and what we've got there is another area that we'd really value feedback on. If there's things that you think would be useful to share that we haven't yet, do let us know. So the place to go to get to the in-year data collection is here underneath data and innovation. That takes you through, once it's verified that I'm really a human, which hopefully it'll decide that I am. It takes you to the program landing page. There's some summary information about the program there, and we update this box with any key changes and new content that we've put on the website. So I'm taking you through to our transformation plan, which is more in-depth information about what the program is trying to do. You'll see there's these different headings here where we put information about what benefits we expect from the program. There's the timeline that I've touched on, included here as well. A glossary that's a very dinky glossary at the moment, but we'll be adding to that more key phrases as we go. And things like principles and working assumptions. We tried to group these things all together to make the information easier to get to. If I scroll back up to the top, we've also got a page that we've made about the program governance to be transparent about who's involved in taking decisions about the program and how that all works. So here you will find information about the sponsoring group, who sits on it, what the terms of reference are, and the same for the program board. And we've got statutory customer, GISC provider representation on those groups. And it also talks a little bit about how we're going to involve software suppliers. And we also publish kind of the meeting minutes from the program and sponsoring group. So those are pages that you can look at and see what is being decided. The other useful pages to flag to you now, we've got a Get Involved page where we're going to be collating kind of key ways that you can get in touch with us as I've set out. So there'll be links to webinars and events there and engagement activities. We're also got the start of a resources page. It's a bit thin at the moment because we're right at the beginning, but over time this will grow. It's got links to the FAQs from the sessions that we've run, and the video for this webinar is going to be going on there as well. Those were the key things I wanted to flag to people. So if you're ready, Rachel, I'll hand over to you for a bit of a deeper dive.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. I'm just going to chuck the link into that page. So if anyone's trying to quickly look at the URL and you want to find out where it is or bookmark it, then I've put that in the chat for you if you want to have a look there. So Laura's taken you through a lot of the program stuff, the timeline things, and I think, as she said, what I'm going to mention now is more the data side and the specifics around that. Should have introduced myself. Sorry, I missed that part. I'm Rachel Wilkes, if anyone's not already heard me speak at one of these things, Head of Collection Development. So my team look after the change requests that we get through and making sure that we specify the data models in all of the collections, but obviously in year is the topic for today, so to make sure that they are fit for purpose and that they are doing the things that they're supposed to do. So that's why we're involved in this side and the data model sides of things. So starting off with the web page, because that's what I wanted to show you today, is there's a lot of this stuff we've kind of talked about. Various groups, we might have mentioned some of this stuff, and what we've really tried to do in preparation for today's session is make sure those bits of information are now on the website. So if you want to kind of quote it, you want to go use it, you want to quote it back to us because you're querying something, then it's written down for you as a place to start with. So I'm going to start from that main in-year landing page, and particularly the bits I'm going to go through are around the core concepts. So if I were to click on the transformation pack, which I've loaded in the wrong order, well done Rachel, failed already, then this is where I'm going to go to first. So about the programme, and I will go a little bit more depth about explaining what these core concepts actually mean. So Laura's done a bit about what the programme is kind of here and some of the things that we're looking for and who we're working with. So I'm going to skip down to this part here. Lots of definition-y parts. So what do we kind of mean by in-year? Now, the crucial part here for me was around what does cumulative mean? Because that's the decision that we took last February, March time last year around the methodology behind doing this. There was various things discussed like discrete or oh, I've forgotten the name of the other one now. Never mind. Anyway, we went with cumulative. Most providers we spoke to saying this actually makes more sense for various reasons, and we took them through all the pros and cons around that. That information is still there if you did want to have a look at that. But basically what it means in cumulative collection is that things are kind of being added to. So it's not like a snapshot, it's kind of what's happening. And that builds to a picture for the end of the year of that's what's happened throughout the whole year. And that kind of then matches the returns that we're doing now, which are every 12 months. And so it's that annual picture that kind of is comparable to that. So that's what we've kind of tried to describe in this section here, trying to kind of make that clear what it means, building up data. And then this really small picture thing in there is kind of showing the rough ideas of how the reference period works. So reference period 1, 2, and then 0. Which I think we've mentioned before, 0 is the annual picture. So that's the one that is 12 months long in reference period. That's the one that compares back to previous things, to previous years. And every provider will do that one. So stepping through a few more details around this then. So will the data model be the same for in-year and annual pictures? So I think this is something to be clear, because I think I did confuse people in the last one around this one. So when we refer to in-year collections, we're talking about the reference periods that are happening as those bits in between. And the annual picture or the end of year picture is what we're saying is that big 12 months picture. So I often talk about it as one annual and one in-year, which is how it's going to start. That is 2 collections a year, but it's we refer to them differently because of the way we're kind of treating the data. So 1 in-year, 1 annual picture. For some providers, that's going to build up to 2 reference periods, 2 in-year reference periods and 1 annual picture. That's for providers in England and Scotland, but that's not for a few years to come down the line. At the beginning, everyone will do 1 year and 1 annual, so 2 collections in the year. So the question here is around the data model. There was lots of very specific things that we were talking about in terms of schema and loading things of changes. So we very definitely want to use the same data model or the same schema, the same XSD, whatever word you want to use there, to be the same for any of those kind of in-year or annual collections. So we can say anything that's a 25-26 collection, for example, that's coming up now, is the same schema. For various reasons. I mean, the big one being it would just be annoying to have that in and out all the time. Some data items, some not in there, some in there. I mean, providers and us, I'm sure it would become annoying if we tried to do that over time. So we thought actually the same one for a year, same one for the next year, same one for after that. So that would just keep it a bit simpler. But there are going to be different requirements underneath that. So the data quality rules and the data requirements around that will handle the kind of bits that are definitely required and definitely not required. So what that kind of means is the schema is probably going to be loosened a little bit on that. And I've got an example or two I can talk through just to demonstrate that later. But that's a really key point, because I think that keeps being asked for this. And what that means is when we look at like the notification of changes that we're doing around that, it will be the same kind of schedule as we've got now. We want to just kind of say this is the data model for 25-26 for both in-year and annual, and this is what's kind of going to change. We don't want to be doing that every single reference period. That would be just a lot of things. So hopefully that kind of helps explain where that is. So I'm going to skip just quickly to the reference period, because this diagram is a little bit bigger than the last one around what that kind of means. So like with now, when we have a collection period, there's a little bit more time after that to do the quality assurance stuff and then sign off the data. So the deadlines do actually pass beyond that. But the reference period we're kind of talking about here it refers to the time frame that the data is being sent. So the first one is going to be the 1st of August to at some point in November. I think it's the 1st or the 15th of November. That's the reference period. And then there are dates after that for the quality assurance time and the sign off bit. But that's kind of important that we talk about that bit. The next reference period, for example, does still start the 1st of August because it's that cumulative effect that I mentioned. So it'll be the 1st of August to sometime in February when we get to there, or it'll be the 1st of August to the 31st of July. That's what we mean by a reference period in this. So we refer to that as like RP1 or RP2 you often see in there, and then RP0. And that comes back to the point around the annual picture is always going to be the same for everyone. All providers will be doing that. And so we're named that RP0 so that if we have more reference periods come along in the meantime, or for England and Scotland, when they will eventually come along, then those numbers don't have to be changed basically all the time. And it does mean that then all the references for all of the last, wait, how long has history existed? Lots of years. The zeros actually make sense. So like the last collection, 24056, the 0 is still in the right place for the, 25056. And so then what will it be here? It will be 28056 will be the first one that's an annual picture for in-year models. So that's what we mean by the reference periods with that. That's where the dates are there. I mentioned really quickly the dates aren't quite locked down. That's because the consultation is hopefully out very soon. Is basically asking for opinions on the specifics around those dates. We've kind of narrowed it down to a window of time where statutory customers have got requirements for use of the data. And we thought actually, given it could be this or that, we might as well go to consultation to see if there's a better option for providers and the sector, and then we'll make a final decision from that. So that's what that consultation is doing. We are having reference periods. We are having two initially, moving to 3 later. All of that stuff is kind of decided. It's all the dates that's the question for that, the very specific dates. So that's the consultation there. And Laura's mentioned the consultation, and I'll skip to that and show you that page when I've finished this bit. So I think that's the definitions around there. So I've mentioned in-year and annual already. And I've mentioned the numbering system on there, so just so that kind of is a bit clearer on people's minds and I don't get confused. So the next bit then, I will skip to the consultations now then. So there is a link here to the consultation page, which again is off that front page. If I scroll down, there's a consultation link there. I skip to it. This is basically what it is. So this is us trying to give you the heads up of when things are going to come. And you can see top of the list here, reference period timings. So yeah, this is us trying to help you understand when things might be needed. We have taken the advice from the data futures consultations we did, and we're going to try and split them up. So there's mini consultations rather than one big one. The first bunch are more around reference periods and a couple of things related to that again, we've got kind of 1 or 2 options, or we think we know where we're going. We just want to sense check that with the sector before we make a final decision. So that's what that first bunch is. And then these are the big data item ones that we haven't got answers yet for. So we want to consult the sector as we would normally do with those things. So I've tried to put the consultation period, the exact kind of range of months, I suppose, that it will be open for. They should all be open for a minimum of 6 weeks, which is why I've got kind of mid dates in there to kind of give you an idea of where they're sitting. I think the key thing I wanted to mention on this page was the decision part. Now, I've put the decision when we're starting to make the decision and statutory customers are starting to make the decision with us. I think I should be really clear that that does not mean that you will get an email from us in May to say what cost centre is going to be there. I just want you to be aware that's when we're starting to make those decisions. And so, we might well have an answer on the reference period one sooner than we will have on the session status to engagement, for example. That's what I was trying to show with this one. If it's really clear and we have a decision, then there's no reason we can't do that. But what's really likely to happen is some of these are going to cross over with each other. And we probably want to see all of those results before we kind of go out and say, yes, this is the right one, particularly the data ones, because some of these cross over with each other in terms of the impacts. So I just wanted to caveat, that's what I've tried to do with that one to help you see where we're kind of progressing and how we're staggering them this side. But there's the key part at the bottom down here, that this is the deadline, the 31st of July. So it's quite likely on a lot of the data ones, you won't actually hear the decision, the final decision point until that moment. And it's that moment because that's where we want to give everyone 24 months notice of the changes, which is what we've committed to do for the programme. So yeah, I wanted to just make that really clear. That's where that's column is kind of representing on that. And down here will be any links to any consultations we've got and any closed ones. So any analysis that's on there, we will put that on there. So that's where the decision, why I've put that there, because you might well get the summary of responses before we've made the final decision, because we like to try and do that early if we can. It kind of depends on how quickly we can get that together, to be honest, and how things are kind of going in the program. But that should be there. So if you need to see a consultation, it's there. You can kind of see where the dates are there, and we'll try and keep that updated in terms of when things are shutting and closing and stuff. So you can kind of see us starting to cross off that list. So going back to the page for a second. So the next bit's on here. So Laura's gone through a chunk of this stuff. I'm going to talk about this one. So this is the evolving data quality section, evolving data requirements section, which is talking about some of the quality impacts. So just going back to that point around the schema and wanting that to be the same, this is just kind of giving a couple of examples where things might be different for in-year as what they might be for the annual picture, and this is how we're going to manage it. So the first example here is around the quality expectations. So it might be that they are going to be kind of phased in, and so they might be a little bit lower in some sense for the in-year return and then a little bit higher at the end of year return. We're still working through what we really mean by that with statutory customers. You know, if data item is really required in year, then it's going to have a high level quality of that bit in that specific area, but maybe somewhere else it's not. All of that stuff is still being worked out. So we're being a bit vague at the moment because we've only thought about principles. We haven't quite got the details to share with you, which is why we picked a couple of examples here to help you kind of see that now. So the first example is talking about qualification awarded data. Now, the ones we picked out here in England and Wales, it's actually required for all reference periods, but Northern Ireland and Scotland currently probably won't use that data for in-year return, but definitely want it for the annual return. So the schema, because we want that to be the same, is going to say it occurs 0, so it will look like it's optional in the schema, but it's not actually optional for England and Wales, and quality rules will kind of mandate that that data is returned, and so that does mean there's going to be a bit of a change to the way the quality rules kind of work there. But the quality rules won't kick in for Northern Ireland and Scotland until the annual picture, because that's when that's required for them. What I'm kind of referring to this when I talk about it, and that's why in the glossary, I think it is, yes, I'm referring to this as data requirements because I think it's more helpful for you if we say, well, actually, for England and Wales, it's mandatory for the whole thing. But if you look at the data model and the schema that's there, it's going to say that it's optional when it's not. So I'm trying to make a distinction when we talk about these things around the data model being the structure, the data specification being the structure and all the things around it like quality rules and reports. But the requirements we talk about, statutory customers need this data or don't need this data. That's what I'm trying to do. You can tell me whether that's working or whether that's just confusing. But I think it's important to say, you know, these data are actually mandatory, even though the schema kind of looks like it's optional. And similar things for the other one. We've got an off-venue activity here in terms of the example being given and that not necessarily being required. So provided in Scotland for this one as the example. I think the extra bit I'll say on this one, which is on here, is around exceeding the data requirements. So there's a point that's been said to us multiple times around, actually, it's more annoying when you make us take data out for certain things, like particularly with dormancy, wasn't it? It was causing a real problem. Actually, why are you making us take it out or not take it out? It's just easier if we send you the data and you decide what you want to do with that. So we're trying to take that on board. And what we're trying to build in is it means that you can send whatever you need to send. If that data is required by statutory customers, rules will enforce it and stuff, and we'll put it in their delivery. But actually, if it's not required, we're going to try and ignore that data. I'm not sure if we're actually going to delete it or take it out or something, but we will handle the problem rather than making you handle the problem, basically. So it means you can oversend the data if you want to, and the schema won't prevent you doing that. And the quality rules will run in some sense, but that's one of the questions to work through is, you know, do you want us to actually validate the data if you send it, or do you not want us to validate the data? Do you want us to ignore it? But I know some providers have said they don't want a surprise in the next reference period if suddenly more data rules pop up for data they've already sent. So we're still working through how we're going to handle that, but that's our intention, to let you send more data than we potentially need at that point, if that is helpful for you. And that's the crucial point. It's only if it's helpful on your side. We don't need it any more than that. I think there's one other thing on this page I was going to mention, which is in this work and assumptions section. So I mentioned about reference periods, and I've probably oversold that about how that works. But one of the bits I wanted to mention here is about the design for end part in this. So this is us trying to design the HTTP and the system to allow us to have more than 3 returns. So at the moment, there is only a requirement for 2 or 3, depending on your country, a year to be sent in. But we don't want to design a system that only stops at 3. Because then that doesn't future-proof it. Something else happens, something changes, or the dates change, or whatever could happen. We don't want to have to redesign the system to do that. So if you see things like this written down, designed for N, that's what it's doing. It's trying to future-proof. It's trying to kind of let it have more if you want. So we know what the first kind of years are going to be. 2 for everyone, and then 3 for England and Scotland later. I think for me, the examples that crop up when we talk about design for N are, if there are other returns out there, so the ones that keep cropping up are often the medical kind of side of things. Are there returns and things happening over there that maybe they could use the HESA data for? And they've definitely told us up till now they can't do that unless the data's in here, because it's way too late to be doing things in their space. Maybe there's a world someday where we can bring back the old HEDIP vision and we can kind of help them use some of our data, and you've got less returns to do elsewhere. That for me is where this comes in. If we design the system so that it won't break, we can then work on that with you later to try and kind of consume some of those returns where that's appropriate. And that's probably looking quite far down the road at the minute, but for me that is something we want to kind of keep in mind. And we're trying to keep in mind with a data model as well, so that if you added a snapshot in at some point, does that still work with the way we've designed it? So that is all of that page. I wanted to just quickly share some of the other links on here. So back to the main page on here. I've shown you the consultation pages, the resource page, which is this one. I just wanted to highlight this is where the data model is being held, the draft data model. So this is what we published back in September last year, I think it was, based on what statutory customers think they need. And this is what we're kind of asking you to test, and what these sessions here are kind of all about, to kind of work through some of those responses and see if there's anything we need to change on there. So that's where it is. It's a big Excel spreadsheet with each of the countries in there. And there's links here to question and answers from these sessions, and we'll keep updating that. And then links here to the recording. There's ourselves on there as well. So if you missed one, or you want to catch up, or you want to go see what our official question and answer was from a particular session, or something you submitted that we got missed out from a session or something, that's where it's all going to be, in that one place. And then there was one more thing I wanted to show you, which was this page. So the specification page, which is linked off that home page as well. I'm sure many of you have seen this, because I know I've got lots of emails about various things on this list, but just to remind you that this is the page where we're highlighting everything that we're looking through. So if I just scroll down and don't make anyone sick, there's a long table with lots of things and updates of where we are. I'm due another update on this page. I will admit some of those updates are a little bit late now, a bit old now, and we have got a little bit further, particularly where we know there's a consultation now. But those are all the data items of things that you've raised with us that may be a problem or you want us to look at. That's the kind of exhaustive list. And this is focusing on getting the data model ready for in-year. So this is focusing on the stuff we kind of want for 28 to 29 to be there. And a lot of these things are going to kind of phase in as we get there. And that's working on the idea that, as Laura mentioned at the beginning, trying to minimize the data model where we can. So if things can be removed, then we will remove them, and we will remove them quicker. We won't wait till 28, 29, but this is kind of aiming to get us ready, so that when we get there, you're happier with some of those things, we've resolved some of those problems, or maybe we've just simply taken a few data items out, if that would help. So I just wanted to talk about that one as well. I think that is all the bits and pieces that I was going to talk about. What have I forgotten? Let me just quick. Yes, no, one more thing. So there's a question that I've had about the number of collections that you're working on at a time. So we've been talking about the schema being the same. We've been talking about the reference periods and when the dates will cross over. And the question there is whether or not providers are working on more than one kind of collection, more than one reference period at a time. Now, the HTTP is going to be designed in such a way that really only one of those should be open at one time. And that's because of the sequencing and the way we want to make sure the data's there. The historical data kind of comes in order so that it works out all the dry fields and stuff it needs to work out in the right order. But there are very definitely exceptions to that. So although we're designing it with that in mind, if you're making an historic amendment, then you're going to be opening a random snapshot one that's in the past open and fixing that one, whatever the problem was, and then carrying on with your current submission. Or there's a scenario where providers might be using the online validation tool, and so a lot of collections are open there. You could be working on a different collection there than the one you're actually submitting in the HDP, because maybe you're getting ahead and you want to kind of get next year's a bit ready, a little bit more validated or something, whatever it is. We know those couple of things are exceptions to that, and I'm sure there's going to be others as well. So the HDP has been designed that way. But I want to make it very clear that we do not think, therefore, that providers are only ever working on one submission at one time. That doesn't make any sense. Of course, you're working on multiple things because you're working about what the student is currently doing now. Our dates cross over, so I talk about the quality assurance period and the sign-off period. That crosses over into the next reference period. So you might be signing off the old one while you're still and doing the quality assurance of the old one while you're still looking at what your students are doing in the next reference period. There's lots of reasons why you as providers or the sector might be working on multiple things, but our system doesn't need to see that stuff. So, you know, we might talk about it being open one at a time. We do not think that you are open one at a time. And I just want to make that really clear, because I think that is a difference with that. And if you see us talking about some of those languages, I don't want anyone to get confused that actually we very much expect that you're going to be working on multiple ones. It's just we don't need to see some of that in our system at that time. So hopefully that kind of helps clear that potential confusion up if that does come up. And I think I'm done now. Yeah, I think that's my list of everything. I'm sure there are questions. I will pause for a moment.
Thanks, Rachel. I'm just having a look at the questions that have come in. So there was one, I have to find it back now in the list, about when we might implement a second reference period. So I popped an answer on there to say we don't know yet, but what we have planned is in summer 2030, we've got a decision point about deciding when we're going to implement that second in-year collection for the nations that want it. So 28-29 and 29-30 will both be the one in-year collection and the annual collection. And a third won't happen any sooner than that.
I can see a ton of you are putting a load of questions in the chat. Please do move them across to the Q&A, because when we extract this out of here, your question will be lost and we won't put it up on the webpage because we can't do that from the chat. It's got to be in the Q&A. So I think some of you have moved it over, but if you haven't, please can you put it over in that side so that it doesn't get lost, because I don't want to lose any questions.
We've got a question about, are the dates for November meant to line up with HESES eventually? If Rachel or perhaps Alison can add anything to that.
Yeah, I might throw that to OFS because I'm sure it was definitely a consideration. I can't remember if the 1st or 15th of November does align or not, so I might have to get you, Alison or Annalise, to do that.
So no, it doesn't. I think we're aware that for most providers, the HESIS census date is the 1st of December. I think we are alive to that, although obviously in-year data collection is intending to serve a wider set of purposes for us than just our funding related ones, and therefore we think on balance having the data kind of as early as we can get it within the academic year is kind of preferable. I think it links to one of the other kind of questions in the Q&A around the kind of longer term future of HESIS and the medical and dental survey. Obviously, there is scope to potentially remove HESIS and MDS as a consequence of having introduced in-year data collection. That would, however, be kind of pending OFS consultation on more of the fundamentals of our funding methods to accommodate the change in that respect. I would anticipate that if and when we kind of go that direction, the kind of relevant census points would be kind of in scope of that kind of consideration more broadly.
Thanks, Alison. I can see another question in there around that specification page that I shared at the end there about adding the year that it's that it could be implemented the change for. I can definitely have a look at that. I think the reason I didn't do that initially is some of them we were trying to work out the best time to make that change, and we wanted to focus on what was the right answer before we work out when the change was. So some of those we wanted to leave blank, but some of them we have now narrowed that down. So yes, I can make sure we can add them in the ones that we can and make it clear if that is the case that we can't yet declare what year that is. We can take that one on. And yes, Jim, I'll use the date format. I think there's another similar question on that around it being the data requirements specification. I guess you're kind of right there. It is around the data that's going to be required. I guess at this point I'm still talking about data specification because we haven't got to the point where we're starting to use the data requirements instead. So, but you are actually right. It is about whether data is required or not required, and whether therefore we need to keep the data items or change them.
And there's a question that's had a few votes from Ian about whether we have any plans to raise the profile of INEA and its benefits to senior management to help unlock some resource. The answer is yes. A kind of accountable officer, budget manager level, some of the key stakeholders we're looking to communicate with in different ways. What we've got planned at the moment is a letter that's going to be going out to accountable officers of updating on the programme and the benefits we'll have and how important it is to fund it. I don't know whether Alison, you want to add anything more to that. You look like you were poised. If you weren't poised, sorry, if you weren't poised, don't worry, I'll keep going.
No, go for it.
So we'll be sending out that communication this month. And it's something that we're, and the kind of programme board and sponsoring group are very alive to, kind of the need to raise the profile and get kind of senior level buy-in to this so that the resourcing is there to be able to implement it. So working on that, there will be a targeted communication going out this month, and we'll be thinking about what more we can do. Look at these other questions.
There's another one in there around notice periods for the notification of changes. So the point I said around the data model being the same for in-year and annual collections, and therefore they need notice earlier to fit with our normal timescales because those dates are now earlier. So yes, I don't think we've actually kind of published anything around what that might be for the future. So I'll take that away and have a look and see if we can put some kind of tentative dates around when we would now expect to announce those dates to you. It's something we've been thinking about on the HISA calendar, actually, for all the records. And if you'd find that helpful, maybe we could do that sooner rather than later then, to basically put the dates of when the notification of changes might be out for each of the collections and each year of those collections so that you can see whether something is going to be coming or when they're going to be coming. But then also crucially, you know something isn't coming if we've passed the date and therefore nothing was there. So yeah, we'll take that one away and I'll have a look and see if we can give you some more rough outlines for that now.
There's just been a follow-up in the chat to the question about targeted comms to accountable officers and whether that can be sent out more widely. I'm sure we can share the contents of that letter, maybe via the newsletter or something, so that it goes out to others as well.
I could see another chat. Sorry, my chat box keeps refreshing every time I answer a question, which is really annoying. There's a question there around the lifelong learning entitlement information that was due to be released at the end of January. Very much there is one out there for 27-28 changes. Now, what we've going to do with the OFS is do a session to go through that basically with them. So any questions that have been raised around LLE at these sessions or at the survey, we're going to take to those meetings. And so Alison and Annalise, who are here today, are going to come along and help us present that. So I think that's the 13th of February in the morning. I think that was out last week in the weekly update. If not, email liaison. I'm sure they can send you a link across to register up. And so, yeah, that's the purpose of those sessions. We'll focus on the LLE stuff there. Alison, do you want to say anything on that?
Just for the avoidance of doubt, because I think it's part of that kind of question. It's absolutely right that it's 27, 28 for the kind of bigger set of LLE related modular provision data changes. There is minimal change, if any, for 26, 27 related to LLE. There is the addition of a valid entry in the initiatives fields. That is the extent of what we're asking you to do for 26, 27 data returns in respect of LLE.
Right, I'm struggling to see any new questions in there that I think we haven't already addressed in what we've talked about. Unless I'm missing something. Laura, is there anything else that you can see in there?
I'm just having a look as well. There's some more useful comments about engaging those senior stakeholders that we'll definitely follow up on. There's a question about how tolerances are approved. That may be a more technical question for you or for Alison potentially.
Yeah, so that's the that's more on the data quality side, the tolerances. So I think, yeah, I think that's the point that we're trying to work through. And my colleague Priyanka, I'm sure, will come to another Q&A session in future, where we're trying to get through a how do I describe this? We're trying to work on a set of data quality principles with the idea of this is how we want to approach it so that you can see the intentions behind it and then start work through the specifics around that is. So we're absolutely alive to the fact that there are going to need to be some probably exceptions in the first year or so, as there was needing to be in data futures. But we want to kind of give you the end point so that you know where we're getting to, if that makes sense. And then kind of work backwards with that. We want to do that with the sector, and I know they've done a couple of bits already. There's a lot more to do in that space. We're very much aware of that, and I know they are very much waiting on us to make some of those consultation decisions as well, because depending on where those data items sit, that might affect, the data quality of that and how they will manage it. So very much with that, and any examples you're putting in here or questions you're putting in here are all going across to them as well, so they can see that. So it's really helpful things that you're pulling out along here. So that may not be reassuring, other than to say that we know that's there, and we haven't got to the point where we've got an answer on that yet. But yeah, anything that you're raising on that is really helpful to kind of hear. I think that also speaks to the point I made around multiple reference periods, and I see there's a couple of comments in the chat there around it. Around when people might be working on things, that's part of our transition work that we're stepping through the detail about how some of that works. So to give an example, one of the things that we've shown the student practitioner group is to basically start to shift some of the dates forwards. In my calendar, I can draw it in my head. I can't do it in person. We're starting to kind of shift them all a little bit so that the dates they're still going to clash a little bit. I think there's nothing we can do about that, but we're trying to mitigate it as much as we can. So slowly start moving them now, rather than suddenly massively having to move them in 28, 29. So that's one of the things. There's going to be lots of other things to consider, and we really want to hear from the sector things that you'd find helpful. So that's kind of one of the things we're doing, and because because that kind of will help get to transition, or help one of the elements to get to transition anyway. But yeah, if you've got any other thoughts, do feel free to send them in our surveys or reply in the chats here, and we can raise them and have a look. Oh yeah, there's a raised hands in here. Sorry, that menu was disappeared from me. Is somebody got their hands raised and is training able to unmute them? Because sometimes that is disabled on these kind of things, which is why the chat's more helpful. But if you
It's
can,
disabled, yeah.
Yeah, I thought
It's
it
in the
might be.
settings, they can't.
Sorry, Jane, I can see the question. We'll go back and make sure that we've answered them. It's just because it's getting lost in the scroll. There's lots of things coming in. We will address that and come back to you if we haven't done already.
And there's a question I can answer, that will partially answer at least, from Jacqueline. Is it still the intention to run optional pilot in 27-28? Yes, we'll need to do some kind of test in 27-28 with a subset of providers. We're developing what that might look like at the moment, thinking about what things do we want to test to give us confidence that we'll be ready, like all the different parties will be ready for 28-29. So that's still the plan, but we'll be sharing more detail on that shortly. There'll be nothing mandatory until 28-29.
I've found Jane's questions. So one of them Ruth has already answered, and then the second one was, the draft data model seems to be data requirement specification. Is this correct?
Oh, sorry, I thought I had addressed that. Yeah, I think it is really, because I think it's talking about the data that is going to be required at some point, and so really that is the requirements. I think at the moment that is also interpreted in the specification, but I think in the way we want to talk about it for in-year, then yes, you're right, that is data requirements.
Thank you, Rachel.
So I think we are probably coming up to as many questions as we can kind of answer in this session today. As I said, we will output all of them in here. We'll just hang on for 2 minutes if you're still typing out your questions. There's the survey link if you haven't got a chance to do it here or you think about this at another time. Please do send that in. There's 2 surveys. There's one about feedback. So if you have a look at that big Excel spreadsheet and you kind of know, well, actually, I like the way you've done this bit here, but actually, what about this field? I kind of want this to be in there as well. All that kind of thing. Feel free to put that in the feedback one. You can submit that as many times as you want. We're not going to stop you doing that, and we'll just kind of take all the comments in together later on. The other one is questions for these sessions. So again, if you've got questions, feel free to send them. I think it's just to help us target topics for these kind of sessions. So they're not just us reading out 100 lists of questions, and we're trying to kind of accumulate them into topic areas to make it a little bit more easy to kind of follow. So please feel free to do that, or if you can't find any of that, then email your question to liaison, and I'm sure it will find its way across to us in these sessions. Hopefully today has been helpful. Sorry in the chat, apparently I speak too quickly. You'll have to rewatch the recording on slow speed. So hopefully you find this really helpful. Slightly different. We'll be back to the normal Q&A kind of format for the next one in March. So just making sure you've all picked that one up. We've put an extra date in because we changed this one. So we will be coming into March with one in April, there's one in May. So I'll let you all go. We'll pick up any questions that are not there and publish the ones that we have put here. Thank you very much for your time, everyone.